Come in, Ocean Sailor. Come in, Ocean Sailor.
The Ocean Sailor Podcast. Brought to you by Ocean Sailor Magazine and Kraken Yachts.
Well, welcome to Ocean Sailor Podcast, episode 6, no less. And listeners, you're sailing on a ship with two anchors. I'm one of them, Dick Durham, and the other anchor is my co-host and good friend and chairman of Kraken Yachts, Dick Beaumont.
Yeah, thanks, Dick. You know, I've been called a lot of things. I suppose an anchor is perhaps similar to something I've been called before. But yeah, it's great to be back on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to the one we're doing today, which is Gerry Northwood's part 2 about piracy, of course.
Yes, interesting man. Had a lot to say in the last one, and I'm sure a lot more to say this time.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Let's crack straight on, eh?
Why not? Yeah, Gerry, in our previous podcast, we were looking at guns on board. Is it a good idea or isn't it? We reached a conclusion. We had a poll, actually, which was sort of 70% against having a gun on board and about the rest of it for having one on board. It'd be good to have your take on that, Gerry.
You know, if you go back to the beginnings of the counter-piracy problem and Somali piracy problem, the political authorities were very against the idea of guns on board vessels, and this is on board the commercial vessels and super yachts. They felt that it'd be a sort of gunfight at the OK Corral, and it would all become rather out of hand. That was the received wisdom, and so for a period, the idea of armed guards on board vessels was verboten. It started to happen anyway because people realised it was the only way they were going to prevent the Somali pirates from ultimately getting on board ship. The other BMP measures were effective to a degree, but not enough to really stop the problem. So we moved on quite a bit, and actually, as a result of that, we looked very long and hard, both the commercial side and the military, but the commercial people in particular looked very long and hard at the jurisdictional issues. One of the reasons that the weapons on board ships, on board commercial ships and super yachts works quite well against the Somali pirate is because most of what you're doing is in international waters. And so the jurisdiction is the flag state of the vessel that you're on. Clearly, if something happens against somebody who has a different flag state, you need to be very careful about what that nation thinks. So in the case of the Italian Marines who were arrested by the Indians, it's because they shot at a bunch of Indian fishermen, and the Indian nation then took a view on that and arrested them. If you're going to carry a weapon, you need to be very clear about the jurisdictional issues. The other thing you need to be very clear about is the circumstances under which you would use that weapon and the competence to use it. If you're going to have a weapon and you're going to start brandishing it, you need to know what you're doing. And you need to be absolutely clear about exactly what you're going to do, because otherwise you're going to be on the wrong end of a firefight. And you're going to end up getting hurt. So, my advice would be if you think the circumstances work for you, then by all means have a weapon, but you need to know what kind of a threat you're up against and whether you're going to have the kind of overmatch you need. Because if you're up against a bunch of people coming at you with AK-47s, you want to be getting in the first shot, and you want that shot to be effective. And you're talking from a yacht, you're talking about relatively close ranges. So I'd say it's a relatively difficult situation. You need to be a very competent weapon handler, and maybe have more than one competent weapon handler on board with good military style hunting weapons. Can't have automatic these days. That's not permitted, but you can have semi-automatic, and you need to be really, really very, very clear about what you're going to be doing. There are, of course, a range of other issues in terms of then what happens when you get to a port. And I know you discussed those in your previous podcast. And that's another range of issues you have to deal with if you're going to carry weapons on board a ship or on board a yacht or any other vessel. But it's the same problem we have with the commercial vessel. You can't just go anywhere with weapons. Otherwise, it would be great. Each commercial vessel would have an armory on board. It carries some weapons. And whenever it goes somewhere difficult, you just hire in the blokes to come and handle those weapons. That would be great. That would be the perfect solution for us. But it just doesn't work that way because of the complexities of jurisdiction and different nations having different views on where the weapons should be and how they should be bonded and everything else.
But even as you've just explained, the legalities then of having a weapon on board on any vessel is that, as I understand it, the baddies are going to be armed with automatic weapons, but you won't be allowed to have automatic, only semi-automatic. So you're already at the wrong end of the fight anyway, are you not?
Not necessarily. I mean, the kind of weapons that we have, that the private maritime security companies have, they are semi-automatic, but they will be of a caliber and range that outranges the average AK-47.
Okay.
An AK-47 isn't a particularly accurate weapon at the kind of ranges that you can be operating at with Western weapons.
Okay.
But of course, Gerry, you're referring to highly trained crew, highly trained operators, which generally the average yachtsman is not going to be. And
No.
I think you've said very clearly that unless you have got a professional level of proficiency with the guns, it sounds like your advice is you don't even think about it unless you have got that level. And even then, there are plenty of issues to consider as a private individual carrying arms. Is that fair?
Yes, it is. And the thing is, of course, you're also operating from the security teams that we're putting on board commercial ships are operating behind steel infrastructure.
Yeah.
They've got protection from that, and they've got height advantage.
Yeah.
Mm. Whereas from a yacht, you're operating at exactly the same level, and you've got no ballistic protection. You know, a yacht is fiberglass. Unless you're in a steel yacht, you might get a little bit of ballistic protection from that.
So, as we would say, reading you loud and clear on that one, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's just talk about clearly, and as again we've discussed, and in the previous podcast, piracy falls into two categories: that which you've already described in Somalia, and I believe to some extent in West Africa, and the rest of the piracy issues generally can be described as, I think you used the term when we were talking before, marine mugging. And so, but those areas, those areas in general are also, if not clinically defined, they are certainly a be aware area that things may go on in those areas. And to some extent, I would think, and I've experienced that, wherever you're going to find poverty, you're going to find crime. And of course, if it takes to the sea, whatever occurs, it goes from being robbery on the land, which doesn't sound that terrible, to piracy, which sounds a hell of a lot worse because it's enacted on the sea. So it'd be very helpful if you could tell us where you think the key areas are.
Yeah, sure. I think the area that's getting the most publicity at the moment is the Gulf of Guinea, West Africa. Much of that is Nigerian criminality operating out of the Delta. It's of a different order of violence from Somali piracy. The Nigerians are operating relatively close to their base. They are well armed, and we're talking properly armed with, crew-fed weapons and higher caliber, and they're extremely aggressive. So if you take on the Nigerians, you need to really know what you're doing. And the security solution for that, which is permitted by the Nigerians, and the whole thing is very controlled by the Nigerian government and their navy and their maritime organizations. So the only protection that's permitted is Nigerian Navy. It used to be Nigerian Navy on board the commercial vessel or the vessel coming in or going out. Now it's on board an escort vessel. So it's effectively a private public partnership arrangement where a private company provides the vessel. The Nigerian Navy then provide the armed team, and the shipping owner pays for that service to go out with his vessel or bring his vessel in. And that is how you protect yourself from Nigerian piracy. There's also a protected anchorage area as well, which is patrolled. So vessels in that anchorage area are safe. But most of that piracy is in the Gulf of Guinea is Nigerian. And actually, from a yacht perspective, the chances are you're not really going to want to go there. It's an easy area to avoid. It's not really on the main transit corridor.
No, I mean,
down the coast of Africa.
I sailed up that way, and the only issue it really is that once you leave Cape Verde Islands, what you kind of need to do it as a sailing route is you need to make as much easting as you possibly can, which in an ideal world would take you off of Liberia or Guinea or Sierra Leone, because you'd want to try and get easting, because what you've got are strong northeasterlies coming down from basically from Gibraltar. So you need to kind of put a big tack in, and that will take you up and give you plenty of easting to help you get towards the Azores. When I did the trip, I called the IMO and spoke to the guys who were very helpful there, and they said to me, well, keep 100 mile off of the coast as your absolute minimum. And I kept, despite the fact I'd have preferred to have gone further over, I kept 200 nautical miles off and was pretty nervous, I will tell you, even when I was. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, I can't imagine anybody would want to, cruise the Gulf of Guinea. It sounds like a crazy idea.
Well, let's just finish on that point. What I would say is that the organization that you want to tap into, if you are going to go anywhere near that area, is MDAT-GOG, MDAT-GOG, the MDAT-GOG.
Just give us that one more time, please, Gerry.
Yeah, the MDAT-GOG, MDAT-GOG. So that is the if you like, the MSC HOA equivalent, and it's run from a combination of the UK and France. It was in the region. It all became a bit too difficult, so the UK and France have shifted the running of it back into Western Europe. Tap into them. The other thing I'd say, actually, for anybody going anywhere around the world, is read the IMB reports, the International Maritime Bureau annual piracy reports. They're online. You can download the PDF and just go back through the years and study them. You're going to, because they break it down into regions, and they literally they report. There is a report there for every single reported incident. Now the danger here, of course, is that a lot of stuff doesn't get reported. And a lot of the very low level stuff doesn't get reported. But the point is that the IMB have captured everything that is.
Yeah, I think you, on your own website, on the MAST website, you keep a continuous intel update.
Yeah, most of the security companies do. We do as well. Most security companies have some kind of offering of security news. Or security-related news. MAST also produces a weekly intelligence, what we call a weekly intelligence update, which actually is basically news reporting from different parts of the world. So we have a page for the Gulf of Guinea, a page for the Indian Ocean, Somalia, Yemen.
Oh, okay. Weekly?
Yeah.
That's good.
We do that. We push that out weekly. It goes out on LinkedIn. It's on our website. And a lot of the security companies have got that kind of service. So that's just a capture of news items that are going on around the world that are related to maritime matters. But I would say that in terms of understanding the kind of maritime crime that might have taken place in an area that you're interested in going to, it's definitely worth having a look at those IMB reports.
And I was aware of, kind of two areas that I've sailed. Well, one passed and avoided, which was the Sulu Sea, the South Sulu Sea. In the island, I think in particular, is an island spelt Jolo, but actually pronounced Hollow, which was Abu Saib's stronghold. And of course, then the Malacca Straits that's constantly brought up. So, what's your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, the Sulu Sea has been going on and the conflict between the Philippines in particular and Abu Sayyaf has been going on for a long while. And it goes right back to I think as early as the 1960s. But more recently, it bubbled up, and there were some rather tragic instances of yachtsmen who got themselves captured by the Abu Sayyaf, and then there was ransoms going on and people being killed. The Philippines seem to have cracked down on Abu Sayyaf a bit. They're being much more aggressive towards them, I think. And every now and then you read about the reports of incidents that are occurring between the Filipino military and Abu Sayyaf. So for a period when the problem was at its height, we were providing armed guards, locally drawn armed guards on board our client merchant ships, to take them through the area. And a number of other companies were doing the same thing, I think. Would I take a yacht through there? I think I'd be very careful about it. Because the Abu Sayyaf situation does exist, and I think as a yacht you're incredibly vulnerable. I'd choose my routing very carefully there, I think.
Yeah, I sailed up. The kind of closest I got to it was north of Borneo. I think, from my understanding at that time, and I spent a lot of time sailing around the Philippines, and I found the people there. I never had any instance at all of any theft, or certainly no piracy. And I think people can tend to lump everything in together because you've got a problem in the Sulu Sea, which is, from my understanding, an area that really has got sort of about a 200-mile range around there. You'd keep away from 200 miles around Sulu, around Hollow. But people tend to go, oh, well, that's it, the whole Philippines. That would be so wrong.
Well, this is why I think it's important. This is why I think it's important to read the IMB reports, the starting point, because it gives you a sense of where the maritime crime is taking place. And so if you read those reports, what you'll see is that, say, for instance, for the Straits of Malacca, and that area anyway, again, it's quite a broad area. What you're largely seeing is maritime mugging of vessels that are at anchor in roadsteads and that kind of thing. And so it's people getting on board. There was a period when it was vessels underway, and it was considered relatively dangerous. And then, of course, the authorities in the area, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, they got together a bit and they started to work on the problem. Some people have said the tsunami back in 2004 may have had an impact in that it took out a lot of coastal communities. But anyway, whatever happened, you see that problem sort of go away, but it's still there in terms of more the lower level maritime mugging, the basic robbery on board commercial vessels which are at anchor in roadsteads. Let's say, look at the IMB reports, because then you can understand where the attacks are taking place, the nature of those attacks, and really, either avoid those areas where there are clusters like the Sulu Sea, or take other precautions.
Yeah, and where else are you thinking then?
I think the Mozambique Channel actually is one we need to be a little bit careful about now, particularly the trouble in Mozambique. And that's not the problem in Mozambique at the moment is very much onshore. All we don't know is how that's going to develop and whether it could result in people onshore in what is now is a section of Mozambique has become a failed state, or is part of is an element of failed state, and therefore would people then start to come offshore to exploit opportunities they might think are out there. Bear in mind that back in the days of Somali piracy in 2009, 10, 11, the Mozambique Channel was an area where Somali pirates operated. It's a relatively constrained area. It's still pretty open, but it's a relatively constrained area. So it's a lot of traffic goes through there. So
I sailed it down from Madagascar, and we stayed mostly over the Madagascan side rather than Mozambique side. But plenty of South African sailors had said to us, you can go into Mozambique if you're absolutely desperate and you've got to, but otherwise you should stay away.
And what do they say about Madagascar?
Well, I sailed over I stayed 3 months up in Madagascar. And
where did you stay?
That's just
whereabouts? Poliara.
I first went into Ile Saint Marie on the on the eastern side, which was absolutely amazing. It was a fantastic area to see humpback whales, and then went up and over the top to Nosy Be, and interesting place called Hellville in Nosy Be, and it really was hell. The big problem there wasn't any form of civilian robbery. It was, it was government official robbery. Because it's, have you got a gift for me? And, I'll take your rubbish away and it'll cost you $10 and all of this sort of stuff. That was in Hellville, very aptly named. But then we had to go there to clear in to the area. And then we came out of there and went further around to a place called Crater Bay, which is also Nosy Be. And there's a little yacht club there. Everything was really hunky-dory, and we didn't run into any problems anywhere in Madagascar. But I will say, Gerry, it was extreme poverty. They were there's a very, very poor nation. Yeah. Although in the main, extremely friendly and beautiful people. And then, of course, you get down off of the, and this comes to more to the mugging issue that we're talking about, an opportunistic crime. You get down into Durham, and I went into Durham to clear into South Africa. Got into Durban Marina and was a bit surprised to see there was armed guards on the entrance of the marina. And I took a walk down, which is about a mile, to the Customs and Immigration Office. And when I got in there to present my papers, the guy said to me, how did you get here? So I said, I've come into Durban Marina and I've just walked down. Oh, he said, no, don't walk back. For God's sake, don't walk back. He said, you're very lucky you made it this far. I was like, oh, Christ. And that's just the kind of poverty and the criminal situation that exists in that yard. And so, in that area, I should say. And so, had somebody followed me back, and got through onto the boat and robbed me, that wouldn't have been robbery in Durban. That would have been piracy because he's on my boat. And this is, I think, where the differential's got to be understood.
Yeah. Well, I think, from the Mozambique Channel point of view, it's relatively safe. It was a problem back in the day. Most of the ships that take armed guards now, instead of taking them all the way down to South Africa as they used to, drop them off in the Comoros Islands.
Oh yes,
kind of that. That's as far as it goes. But I do think the situation in Mozambique, which clearly has got quite out of hand in one of the coastal areas, needs to be watched very carefully now as to where that goes. And the Mozambique and the area around it is something to be just wary of, I think, at the moment.
Is that because of change of government or potential civil war? Or?
It's because there's an insurgency going on. There's an insurgency. There's an IS insurgency, but the government forces, many of which are mercenaries, are not a great deal better than IS. So it's and then of course there was the horrendous story last weekend of the people that were the Western people from the oil companies that were killed or chased out of the area. So Mozambique is one to watch at the moment.
Oh, right. Okay. When I sailed up through that area, I did speak to the Seychelles authorities, and because I was trying to assess how far I wanted to sail up into the Seychelles, but they said to me, look, once you're within our territorial waters, you're definitely safe. But how you get there and how you leave our waters is an issue that you should be concerned about. And as you say, so I was aware that the Comores were considered to be safe. I had intended to go up there diving, but actually time constraints, and I was enjoying myself pretty much in Madagascar. So and we did a lot of diving around there. So many whales and fantastic place to see. So we didn't actually go there, but yeah, very interesting place. So it's good to know that, because these things are going to develop quite quickly, aren't they? Once it's like you see there's an outbreak of robberies on board in a given anchorage somewhere in the world, and of course it generally is going to come down to one or two guys, and they get caught, and then the problem goes away in terms of the kind of opportunistic robberies that we've been talking about. And how do you feel about the Caribbean now? What's your thoughts on the risk to yachts in the Caribbean?
I think it's really just a local risk. We're not seeing much in the way of second incidents. Every now and then something might happen. Particularly, I've seen more, I think, over in the of people being attacked or worried by fishing vessels and that kind of thing over in the Western Caribbean, alongside Central America, and certainly some of those Central American countries are we've got to be quite cautious about. But I think most of it with the Caribbean, when I'm seeing it seems to be fairly straightforward. I think just normal precautions in terms of not being out on your an anchorage road.
Yeah, because of course you've got a lot of experience. So I think one of your big operational centres and areas of responsibility for quite some period of time, I understand, was the Caribbean and trying to control the drug smuggling issues. That was on HMS Liverpool, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes. I mean, that's some while ago now. It's 2005 we were doing that. So I'm a little bit out of date in terms of my sort of hands-on experience of the Caribbean. But yes, I mean, we spent quite a bit of time interdicting the Venezuelan drug runners that were coming up into the Windward Islands with cocaine. So, and that's certainly at the time, it may well still be the case, it's quite an endemic problem of cocaine being moved into the Windward Islands, then up through the Windward Islands, along with weapons and that kind of thing. So it just contributes towards the general sort of levels of criminality and violence. And then that cocaine, most of it was then finding its way back out again on commercial aircraft in the hold, or on fishing vessels, or on yachts go to Europe.
And on yachts, were those yachts captured and used for drug smuggling?
No,
or
this is people carrying a bit of cocaine to help pay for their trip.
Oh gosh, really?
This is yachtsmen as smugglers.
Yes.
And and a lot of that was going on.
Well, there was enough that if you have something in the region of 80 tons of cocaine going up in through the islands, 80 to 100 tons of cocaine, about 80% of that was then finding its way back out again to go to commercial markets in Europe or up in the States. At the time, I think it was mostly going to Europe, and it was finding its way to Europe in penny packets all over the place. So yes, that must have been ordinary recreational liveaboard yachtsmen who were prepared to do that kind of thing. And there were a few caught at the time as well. And there was also some instance where baggage handlers were arrested at Heathrow because they were part of that supply chain, bringing stuff in the holds of aircraft. And of course, the security in that part of the world is not the same as it is over here in the West, where trying to chuck a bag over the wire at Heathrow and have someone pick it up and stick it in an aircraft, probably not going to happen. But in some of those Caribbean airports, they're very open, and so handing a bag across to somebody who then sticks it in the hold of an aircraft and has someone ready to pick it up in London or elsewhere was certainly feasible at that time. Whether things have been tightened up now, I don't know.
In the off chance that they don't lose that particular piece of luggage. Which is
yes, I mean probably some fairly good reasons not to, given who the ultimate owners are.
Yeah, quite.
Of those people.
Yeah, great. I mean, that's very helpful, and certainly knowing the reference places or the websites to refer to. One of the things that we should get you to talk about, Gerry, is that I understand you ran or run a conduct after capture seminar or education program. And I understand also that that paid some dividends for one of the people that you did actually train, or one of the crews that you did actually train. You tell us a little bit about that, if you will.
Yeah, I've got to be a little bit careful about naming the yacht because I think the owner's a bit private about it. But yes, there was a super yacht which was boarded off. I think it was off Sardinia, but it's one of those sort of those areas in the Mediterranean. And it was an armed boarding by some people who wanted to rob them of their valuables, and they robbed the safe, and they got away with a lot of money and all the rest of it. And afterwards they said they were very grateful for the conduct after capture training they'd had from Mars, because it taught them to do some of the sort of basic things, and really a lot of it is it's things like not looking the people in the eye, so that you keep your eyes down and you avoid any kind of conflict with them. Because they're armed, you're not, and actually it's a fait accompli. Yeah, if they want the valuables, they're going to take them. What you don't want to do is end up with individuals getting hurt in the process. There's a lot of good guidance out there as well. Both, MSC HOA, for instance, has conduct after capture training or conduct after capture advice for commercial crews, and that applies equally to anybody else. And that's specifically with regard to the Somalis, but a lot of that still is generic and applies elsewhere. So there is a lot of guidance actually you can just read about and think about. And same goes actually for protecting yourself in strange places. And it's like your South African friend telling you you shouldn't have walked down that particular path. It's having that kind of awareness. And checking your surroundings, and when you go to a hotel room or room, checking for your escape routes and all that kind of stuff. A very interesting one actually is if you're in an area where there's an insurgency and you're on a bus, don't be on the roadside side of the vehicle. Wherever that bus is, wherever you're swerving around the road, shift your seat across so you're on the non-curbside side of the vehicle. Because if there's going to be a bomb going off, it's more likely to be from the curb than it's from the middle of the road. There's a lot of simple things which actually you can do to help yourself.
I mean, the thing that I've told people, and I think they should, and I think this is, obviously this is where your conduct after capture training would be very useful to people. I think people have got to understand they're often rocking up in a very poor area with £1 million, £2 million, £5 million yacht that has got a massive advertisement along its side saying, "Listen, I've got money."
Yeah,
and you've got to appreciate that. You can't expect that. That's. I've been to places at this day and age, doesn't sound so likely, but then Sydney white people in years and years and years. We've turned up in a 58-foot yacht or something, and it's like a spaceship has landed. It's the whole village will come out. I'm certainly not saying don't do it and don't go to those places, but just be aware. If you do go, I've told people, if you do go, you're going to wind up going shopping. Make sure you put your money in 3 or 4 different pockets, and the most you ever pull out is the equivalent of £2 or £3. And I've seen people pull out great big rolls and then, standing at a market stall.
Yeah.
And before you know where you are, there's 200 people around. It's just a bit of thought. And I'm sure I imagine that's a large part of what conduct after capture would cover. I mean, obviously everybody hopes and prays that that's never going to happen. But like in most cases, the more you're prepared and the more you understand what's going on, the greater your chances of coming out of it the other side, in one piece are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we don't want to be frightening people, and I think that the watchwords I would use is be risk aware, not risk averse.
Sure.
And be aware of where you're going and what the consequences might be, and how you can try and protect yourself and make it an enjoyable event rather than something that's rather tense and fraught. The both the advice in terms of how to conduct yourself and how to prepare yourself there's plenty of it out there. I mean, probably just within your own magazine and your experiences, Dick. You've got some good advice. Lots of other yachtsmen have as well. So there's lots of good advice out there on how to manage those kind of situations where you go into a new anchorage and meet people from the local community. And the same thing goes if something does go wrong and someone does get on board your vessel. There's advice there on what you should be doing, and some of that advice is specific to the region because there are specific types of criminality. One of the good pieces of advice I've heard about is that in the West Indies, if someone comes on board your vessel in the night, don't turn the light on. Don't let him see you, because if you see him, he may feel that actually he needs to protect himself from being identified.
Yes.
And that could have very bad consequences for you or your crew. So once somebody's on board and if they're armed, they've got overmatch. What you want to do is get rid of them by the cheapest means possible, which is probably to hand over whatever it is they want and let them get away with it.
Yeah.
It comes hard, but that's far better than hospitalization or worse.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
That kind of comes back and meshes with the advice that I got from a guy that turned out to be Australian SBS guy in Borneo, Malaysia. And he said, wear a smile, give them exactly what they ask for, try and keep smiling throughout, and don't look unhappy about the fact they've stolen it from you. I mean, that's not so easy to do, I appreciate. But what he said is that's going to be the cheapest way out the situation, both in terms of your safety and probably damage to your vessel as well. Because if you don't want to help them and they start putting a jemmy behind the navigation equipment in the cockpit, it's not really where you want to be. So if you've given them enough stuff that they're content with, he said, most of them it'll be possibly the equivalent of 3, 6, or 12 months income, and they're quite happy, and off you go. And I suppose you need to clear out of that area before he tells all of his mates that it was so easy. But,
that's right, come back from more.
But it's a lot of it. I think is very obvious once you've experienced those situations, and the things that you've told us today, Gerry, have been very useful because it just helps people, get the mindset. But I think it's vital, and what we're trying to do here in this podcast and in Ocean Sailor, and talking to you, and talking to Renee, and discussing this topic, is we're trying to just explain to people how to conduct themselves, what to do, and how to load the dice in their favour. So really appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure.
Please, could you tell us where the listeners can find your organisation, MAST, and how they access it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've got a website, mast-security.com, and you can get in touch with us directly through that, or give the operations team a call. On the website, it tells you all the sort of things we do and the kind of services we can offer. It's all fairly clear.
So you don't have a website, Dial a Gurkha, then?
Not quite, but it's but if it's an armed team or an armed individual or a couple of people that someone might want, we can offer UK, Eastern European, or Nepalese.
Right. Okay.
Guard.
Excellent.
Obviously, there's a price difference between UK and Nepalese, but our commercial clients largely use the Nepalese nowadays because the pound, shillings, and pence piece is very important to them, and so the market has moved that way by and large. There are very few clients now still using the UK maritime security
Right.
It'll be very important to yachties as well, because there's a very large contingent of yachties that actually kind of only breathe in. They're doing the whole thing on a budget, but people seem focused, and obviously from a commercial perspective, we can understand why. I mentioned to you when we were talking before about yacht deliveries that we would prefer to make by the boat's own hull. So rather than ship we got quite a lot of interest in Australia and New Zealand. And that is a cost of about 50k to ship a boat to Australia or New Zealand, whereas it's less than half that to have it delivered by a crew. And you very kindly said, well, if you're looking for protection or security in the dangerous area, your company can provide it, and at a cost of $2,500, something like that. I think, I'm not going to hold you to that, of course. That's a relatively small sum for that amount of peace of mind. And I think that's very valuable. And I would suggest if anybody has got the time constraints that they really, really need to get their boat to the Med from the Asian, so the Southeast Asia, or conversely wants to come down from the Med, I would certainly strongly recommend for the sake of a couple of grand, they get in touch with you and your company and look to work out how that can work.
Yeah, it's a very well worked up operation. I mean, it's going on all the day in, day out, 24/7. There's a vessel-based armory in the Southern Red Sea where we keep our weapons and our people. There's another one out in the Indian Ocean, and there's another one up at Fujairah. So you've got a choice of routes. And if you wanted to have protection that goes right the way through the Indian Ocean to the Malacca Straits, there's an armory over in Malaysia as well at Port Klang. So there's quite a number of different options. If you're going south, then the weapons and the team can be dropped off in the Comoros or in the Seychelles, or even go as far as South Africa. All these things are possible. Obviously, the longer the trip, the more it will cost. The Nepalese guards have got a really good reputation. We take them from both UK and Indian ex-army, so they've got good training, good military training behind them. They've been specifically trained for operating in a vessel as well, so they've got their STCWs and other qualifications. And we've got clients, top level shipping clients who love the Gurkhas. They think they provide a really good guarding service, and that's an all Gurkha team. Back in the day when it all started, everybody wanted the UK. It was tremendously expensive, and people were prepared to bear that cost because they felt the risks were very high. As the whole business has become more commoditized and the risks have been quantified, the commercial world doesn't want to spend quite so much money. So different nationalities became involved, whether it's Eastern Europeans, Indians, Filipinos, Nepalese, Sri Lankans. They're all there. And they all come at different price points because they come from different.
Well, who doesn't love a Gurkha? I mean, I think they've certainly got a special place in many British citizens' hearts, and have got a reputation that they really do know what they're doing.
Yes, we're very strict about making sure that our Gurkhas have very good English standards. English is the lingua franca at sea, and there are other companies out there that are not as strict about it or about the training standards that the teams come on board with. So I would recommend that. I'm not saying that you specifically have to go to Mars. There are other good companies out there, but I would look very carefully at the company you use and make sure they do have proper ISO standards. There's an ISO 28007, ISO 28000 standard, which security companies should be working to. Being on the UK register obviously helps as well, because we've got the backing of the Department of International Trade behind us. Our weapons are legal. The whole thing is properly sewn up in a legal fashion, and we're a properly run business. So, and there are others out there like that. So we're not unique in that respect, but there are others that are, if you like, what we call the Costa Coffee Shop outfit, who are running the whole thing off the back of a fag packet and a mobile phone. So just do your due diligence on the.
Yeah, considering the costs that we've discussed, they're not prohibitive, and I think the last thing anybody wants to do is get involved with a less than very professional security team. I think that's
I would argue the same, wouldn't I? But there are whatever price we offer you, there'll be someone out there who'll be prepared to offer.
Yeah, of course.
I can guarantee you that. But we offer, a very high, not gold plated, but it's a very good standard, because we're dealing with weapons.
Sure.
And we're dealing with people's lives, and we take that very seriously.
Gerry, one thing during the Rachel and Paul Chandler hostage snatch story, which I was then on Notting Monthly covering, there was a rumour about Russian companies taking people on shoot-to-kill holidays out of Somalia. Did you ever come across that? I'm sure it was just a rumour, but
no, I didn't.
Hear that?
I did see. I remember there was a spoof video on YouTube around that time where you could go on a sort of a shoot to kill cruise. Right. There's an American one. Okay. And go and bag yourself to pirates. But no, I've never seen anything for real like that. Okay. Yeah, it's that kind of kind of Borat type thing. Really,
Borat. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Very good.
Well, that's good to know. It was just a rumor. False news again.
Well, I hope so.
Well, Gerry, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for joining the Ocean Sailor podcast, and I hope we'll talk to you again.
Thanks very much, Gerry, and look forward to talking to you again at some point.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thanks, Gerry.
Cheers, Gerry. Thanks. All the best.
Well, I must say that was really fascinating. What an eye-opener. There's so much more to this than meets the eye, isn't there, Dick? And, Gerry really gave us the lowdown on so many aspects of this that, I must say it was very refreshing to hear.
No question of that. And I have to say, I feel a bit safer having heard what he's got to say, to think that there are some professional eyes out there perhaps looking after us.
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely interesting because, as you might remember, Dick, I was telling people that in previous podcasts that whilst they might want to carry guns on board, it's not quite as simple as all that, getting them in and out of each country that you're going to visit. No. But of course, they've got a solution, which is this, and I must say, I thought that was incredible, a floating armoury.
Yeah.
Where they can pick up their arms once they've, on the way up, and they can drop off their arms once they're on the way back. And of course, the security officers can leave at that point as well. So there's no necessity to be clearing in and clearing out and getting off crew lists and go. I must say that the logistics of how this works is, of course, the thing that Gerry is an expert in.
Indeed.
And that I thought, I hope a lot of people take interest in that, and it gives everybody a much better understanding.
It certainly does. I mean, the floating armoury, of course, being in international waters, I suppose in a way it's a little bit like going airside, is it, at an airport, do you think? You've gone through passport control and you're in a kind of no man's land, so they can drop these weapons off or pick them up or pick security guys up on and off without having to involve the infrastructure, customs, immigration of a particular state.
Yeah, well, my experience of that situation is twofold. One, if you go into somewhere like, well, God forbid you tried, into Australia carrying arms, you're going to have the world of officialdom come down on your head as a certainty. But other countries treat it as a means by which they can extract quite heavy sums of money from you for the pleasure of returning and keeping your weapons. And of course, they've avoided all of that. Yes. And legitimately avoided it because the vessel stays in international waters.
Yes. No.
So it's intriguing. And of course it has been, and I think this is a point that I wasn't aware of quite so much. It has been a major success, and the piracy issue is to a very large extent, I think, controlled now in that whole Somalia, North Indian Ocean area. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's also fascinating to understand that the Gurkhas are available through MAST to become part of your crew. I think I'd feel very safe with the Gurkha as part of my crew.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a fearsome reputation as being extremely tenacious fighters, and I'm sure from a security point of view. Have you ever met a Gurkha, Dick?
I have, yes, several.
Yeah, and I found them tremendously courteous and people, and very humble too.
Yes,
I mean,
they are. You could get it so wrong, couldn't you?
Yeah, and yet at the same time, obviously, there's absolutely no nonsense accepted. So, of course, the other thing that Gerry has mentioned in that is the conduct after capture that one needs to adopt, and I think that's valuable. To not catch their eye and smile. I mean, it's difficult circumstances to try and do that in.
Well, absolutely right. That good guidance. It might sound perhaps a bit obvious, but on the other hand, it's good to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And of course, pity the poor pirate that takes Rene Temerson aboard. I think the pirate himself would find himself walking the plank and not the other way around, don't you?
Yeah. They'll have definitely got more than they bargained for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how easily Rene would follow Gerry's advice. I can't tell you. I've never met anybody that could shut him up, actually.
I think I'd rather look Blackbeard in the eye than Rene.
Yeah, I'll tell you what is incredible, and I think a very big feather in our caps, if I can blow our own trumpet a little bit. But Rene, as a result of your first article, Dick, Convoy of Fear, and the podcast, has now been approached with a book offer about his whole story, eh? That's a bit special.
That is good news. Oh, well, good luck to him.
So, yeah, people are listening. Well, I think that's about it for today. It's been intriguing. No doubt, Dick, you've got some quippy anecdote to sign us off with.
As you know, Dick, I will try my best. And as I say, the pieces of 8 on Treasure Island, in fact, turned out to be the Bitcoin of wishful thinking. So it's goodbye from me.
Oh, my God, and it's just goodbye from me.
Thank you for listening to the Ocean Sailor podcast. If you have any feedback or questions, please get in touch with us by email at hello@oceansailormagazine.com or through any of our social channels. The Ocean Sailor podcast is sponsored by Kraken Yachts. The latest Kraken 50 is about to launch, and you can follow the progress of the build through Ocean Sailor magazine and on the Kraken Yachts YouTube channel. You can find more information at krakenyachts.com.